Francis is my given name, and I am currently 18 years old. I'm a thrill seeker or an adrenaline junkie. I welcome risk with open arms. I like to skate on thin ice or play with fire, and perhaps take my life into my own hands, as the idiom goes. Since it's spring break again, I'm looking for new adventures. I want to be in a dicey situation to help me perform better in any task under pressure. Who knows, this ability could be vital to my survival in the future. My best friends Andrew, Joshua, and Christopher are as daring as I am. They agreed to join me in visiting haunted houses. My real goal is to scare the living daylights out of them. I myself want to be scared out of my wits, too. But little did I know that this haunting experience scarred me for life. This is a story that I would like to share, especially for those people who are fraught in danger and playing with fear. Many students were eager to get away from the harsh weather and their own weighty academic loads for a week in a warm location like Florida or the Caribbean when spring break arrived in March. In contrast, our group decided to spend the week visiting haunted houses. Christopher initiated his research and found the Granger House Museum, the Cunningham House in Alameda County, and the Villisca Axe Murder House to be three of the scariest places in Iowa. We intended to go to all three. The spooky white lady that appears at the Granger House Museum at midnight highlights the challenge there, while the Cunningham House appears to be a haunted house straight out of a horror film, and I'm curious about the eerie activity that occurs inside. The ghosts of the deceased family are claimed to haunt the Villisca residence, and I am excited to see how Andrew, Joshua, and Christopher would react to the paranormal activities in the house. The first two allegedly haunted houses we visited did not frighten us in the least. We had hoped for more terrifying things in the first house. I had hoped to see additional paranormal activity in the museum and carriage house, as well as an apparition of the White Lady, but this did not occur. We overheard a noise, but Joshua had dropped his cell phone in the lobby, which is why there was an echo in the background. Andrew didn't mind paying $40 for this tour because he was fascinated by its history. However, as he listened to the tour guide, we saw him biting his fingernails, suggesting that he was nervous. Christopher was likewise intrigued, but, like me, he hoped for something scary. He rubbed the back of his neck a lot to express his dissatisfaction. On the second night, we proceeded to the Cunningham House, in Alameda County. We were hoping for something truly terrifying in this house, which looks about ready to slide down the hill. The only thing about this house is that it's on private property, so Andrew shook his head many times as he hesitated again to enter the property, for we might get into trouble. But it's a terrifying overall aura that sends chills even by simply looking at it from the road, which could be the main reason for his concern. Christopher stepped out of the car and told us to be ready for the adventure. I lit a cigarette and gave Joshua the task of carrying our bags, while Andrew trailed behind me. The old mansion appeared to be deserted, which added to my excitement. We had free access to the premises because there were no gates. Christopher took a peek around, and seeing that no one else was around, he seized the doorknob of the crumbling two-story house. He pushed the door gently to the creaking sound of rusted hinges. He scanned the inside of the house with his flashlight and beckoned for us to enter. I carefully entered the house after throwing my cigarette butt and observed that it was chilly inside. We continued to enter, but there was nothing terrifying about it save for a noise we heard inside, which turned out to be a rat crawling through the ventilation ducts, making a scratching sound. We decided to leave the house due to the terrible smell inside. We departed dissatisfied because it was our second night there and we hadn't had any fun yet. Our final destination is Villisca, a classic American town whose name literally translates to evil. Villisca made national headlines in 1912 when an axe-wielding assailant massacred a family of 6 and 2 guests. The Moores were a typical rich family that was well liked in the neighborhood. Their terrible and incredibly violent death has remained a mystery to this day. Their house is a picturesque 19th century structure, a small house of 3 rooms and an attic that is somewhat disproportionate to its notoriety because the small house is known as one of the most haunted places in the United States. When we arrived, we were astonished to see Villisca is still a sleepy old town until today. I mean, talk about heritage, this is it. Most of the houses are still remnants of the early 1900s. We started slowing down the main road on the left side of the house. There are a few houses within the block where the house is, but the distance is still significant. I wonder how do the neighbors feel being so close to one, if not the most haunted house in the entire United States. There is no parking space in the house itself, so we park on the side of the road. In front of the house is a white sign that says Villisca Axe Murder House. The house has been a well-known tourist attraction among thrill seekers and paranormal experts. As we walked on the dirt ground leading to the house, I noticed several neighbors eyeing us. Their gazes were different. It was like an ominous warning not to continue our house tour. But Christopher has already reached the main door. The main door is actually on the side of the house, but if you look at it from above, you would think otherwise. Johnny the caretaker is waiting for us at the front door. I paid him around $400 so that we could stay at the house overnight. $400 is a big amount, so I have to bully not just a few students to come up with this amount. Of course, every other expense like gas, food, and whatever was covered by Andrew. I watched the movie about this haunted house, and the caretaker there was a boring and awkward man in his late 40s. So this is what I'm expecting. But there is nothing boring about Johnny. He's a cool, chatty young man. He's wearing a black cap and a dark green shirt, full of tattoos on both arms, and has a goatee. You could really feel that he's passionate about this house. He smiled at us and started his spiel. "Hey guys, Johnny Hauser here, and this is the Villisca Axe Murder House." He paused, looked at everyone, and ushered us inside. Johnny cautiously toured us in each room. He showed us where the hot points are, which are the places in the house where paranormal activities are likely to occur or have occurred in the past. He showed us where the parents were killed, where the 6 kids were killed, their positions on the bed, and even the axe marks on the walls and ceilings. Despite his passion for telling the story, we could feel that he was apprehensive and kept on glancing at his wristwatch. He was explaining how the events unfolded on the fateful day of the massacre when he suddenly stopped in front of Mary Catherine's room. We could feel that he was hesitant to enter. He just stood in front of the door and warned us, "This is the room where one of the paranormal experts stabbed himself on his chest." He acted a stabbing motion on his chest and continued, "We found the guy bleeding in the morning. When he came around in the hospital, he told the doctors that he didn't know what happened." Johnny then looked me in the eyes and said, "My advice is if something paranormal starts happening in this room, go out as quickly as possible. Don't push it." He took the key to the house from his pocket and handed it over to me. I wondered why Johnny did not show us the attic. After all, that is where the killer hid and waited for the Moore family to sleep before killing them. That should be the most interesting place in this house as far as I'm concerned. I took the keys that Johnny gave me from my pocket and checked. One of them was labeled, "Attic." "Good," I whispered to myself. Andrew said that he felt something heavy on his shoulder as soon as Johnny left. Joshua said he felt the same thing as well. I cringed upon hearing this because it's the same old bullshit on every paranormal investigation on television. Christopher told them that because they are scared that they are feeling this way. Their mind is playing tricks on their body. I agreed and said that as a matter of fact, I don't feel anything. That's a lie though. In fact, I felt very heavy even before we entered the house. For a moment there, when Johnny stopped in one of the rooms, I thought I heard a voice saying "do it," over and over again. I kept this from everyone. Andrew noticed that every single mirror or glass article in the house was covered by a white cloth. I explained that according to the actual events, the killer himself covered those for the reason that only he knew about. Joshua curiously tried to remove one of the cloth covers in the mirror, but I found myself unconsciously stopping him by holding his wrist. Christopher had a different look at me from then on. I am secretly offended and somewhat bothered by the way he glanced at me. Joshua on the other hand nonchalantly raised his arm and said "fine," and backed away. Christopher suggested that we close all the lights in the house and just use the red candles that he brought. We are all surprised that he brought something like that. It's uncharacteristic of him. As soon as we closed the light, strange things started happening. For instance, we would see shadows that belong to none of us that dissipates once we notice it. We would hear indistinct voices from the second floor and in Catherine's room. Andrew is visibly bothered by all of this and is begging us to leave the house. I felt a sudden bout of rage not only towards Andrew but surprisingly towards everyone. I couldn't explain it, but it seems that I am angry for no reason. I shook the feeling off and focused on the point of bringing them here, which is to scare the crap out of them. We all settled on the living room floor for the night. We brought sleeping beds with us. I waited when all of them fell asleep and carefully took the key labeled attic in my pocket. After making sure that everyone is fast asleep, I took one of Christopher's candles, lit it, and started my way up the stairs. The entrance to the attic is a small door inside the master bedroom. The master bedroom is where Mr. and Mrs. Moore were bludgeoned to death by the blunt side of the axe. I looked at the axe mark on the wall and got a sudden rush of adrenaline. I walked to the side of the bed to where the Moore couple's head would have been resting when they were killed. I clasped both my arms, imagining myself wielding an axe. It was at this precise moment that I started hearing voices telling me to do it. For some reason I did not get scared of the voices. Instead, I welcomed it with delight. My eyes went wide and my smile turned into a grin. I swung my arms above my head. I realized that I had put an exorbitant amount of force on my reenactment. I looked on the back and was surprised that the mark on the wall would have been on the same exact spot if I was the one that swung that axe that night. After this, I became disoriented. I took the candle and walked a few meters on top of the stairs. I crouched a little and scanned the surroundings. I listened closely. I heard voices of little kids laughing. I was restless and couldn't contain my joy. Adrenaline kept pumping on my body. I was in ecstasy. I closed my eyes and shook the feeling off. I started walking to the door going to the attic. When I unlocked the door, a sudden gust of wind hit me and blew the candle off. I shrugged it off, threw the candle on the floor, and walked inside. I found myself clawing the wall with my left hand while walking to the center of the room. I'm beginning to feel the hate on everyone that I earlier felt. But this time, I had the urge to release this hatred using violence. I was on this thought when I saw an axe lying on the floor. I crouched down on one knee and felt the axe from top to bottom, slowly caressing it like what I did when I got my first car. The damp stuffy air suddenly seemed familiar to me. My right hand took a firm grip on the weapon, and I stood up and promptly held the axe with both hands facing the door. I heard the voice one last time saying, "Do it." I don't remember anything after that point. I felt a sharp slap on my face. When I opened my eyes, I saw Christopher and the rest of the guys staring at me. I remember being in the attic. I looked around making sense of what happened. I was still in the attic and the guys found me here. I looked at my hands, the axe was gone. I was so confused. "Francis, are you okay?" Christopher slapped me again and shook my shoulders. "I'm fine," I answered. "What happened?" I looked at Christopher. "We woke up and you were gone. We found you here," Andrew replied. "What time is it?" I asked. Joshua looked at his wristwatch and said it's 4 AM, and looked at me. "When did you come here?" asked Christopher. I was about to answer his question when we heard knocking on the master bedroom. We all looked at each other and agreed to check it out. There was nothing unusual when we got there. We were about to leave when we heard another knock. We all looked at the window. There's no mistaking it, the knock came from there. Andrew was so scared that he was almost at the point of crying. "We are on the second floor," Joshua looked at us. Both I and Christopher nodded. "Let's get the hell out of," Andrew was interrupted by a loud bang downstairs. It's as if one of the doors in the room closed forcefully. I ran downstairs hoping to catch if there was anyone trying to scare us. When I looked back, Andrew and Christopher were closely following me. For a moment there I was afraid that the century-old wooden stairs would collapse due to our combined weights. Fortunately, it's more sturdy than I thought. I immediately scanned all the rooms and found that Catherine's room door was shut. This is the same door that the caretaker warned us about. When I walked towards the room, the doorknob suddenly clicked and twisted. I stopped walking, unsure what to do. There's no doubt someone from the inside did that. Suddenly, the door slowly opened. I looked at Andrew and Christopher. They are also bracing for whoever is coming out. On the far side of the room, there is a silhouette of a woman in a black dress with disheveled hair looking at us. I motioned for Christopher to give me one of his candles. I lit it and raised my arm towards the figure, but there was nothing there. Andrew and Christopher confirmed that they saw the figure as well. We heard someone going down the stairs. When I raised the candle towards it, we saw Joshua. I did not realize that he stayed upstairs when we all went down to check the room. "You okay, bud?" Christopher asked him concerningly. Joshua nodded slowly. Andrew looked at me. Joshua seemed pale and disturbed. I had enough. I asked everyone to go back to the living room and get some sleep. In the morning, we all talked about what happened. Christopher told us that after we slept, he woke up inside Catherine's room. He was sleeping on the bed. He has no recollection of how he got there, and most especially, how he got the bite marks all over his body. When he lifted his shirt, we saw little bite marks. It is as if little kids nibbled on him while he slept. As for Andrew, he said there's one time that he felt that someone lifted his left leg. He assumed that it was just one of us playing a prank on him, that's why he ignored it. Joshua was strangely still silent that morning. He was pale and did not eat much of the breakfast that Andrew prepared for us. At 10 a.m. in the morning, Johnny walked in. After a bit of chit-chat, he looked at Joshua and said, "You removed the cover on one of the mirrors, didn't you?" Joshua looked at us and slowly nodded. Andrew asked him what happened, but Joshua hesitantly replied nothing. I gave the key to the house back to Johnny and hugged him. "Thanks, man." I smiled. "See you again, guys. I hope you got your money's worth." He patted me on the shoulder. Andrew is the first one to step out of the house. He said that it's like stepping out into another dimension. Back to reality, he sighed with relief. I and Christopher followed, my right hand slung over his shoulder. This experience made me realize that I see him as my younger brother. Something that I don't have. Joshua picked up our bags and looked back at Johnny, who was waving his right hand and smiling. We stopped and waved at Johnny. Johnny pointed at Joshua and said, "Cover all your mirrors and glasswares for a week or two." He put a thumbs up sign, "You'll be fine. The demons should be gone by then," he said. Then he closed the door. We all looked at Joshua.